Greetings, Venerables, and all our dear friends who are joining us for this day or days of our annual gathering for the AGM and also the conference. And thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be with you and just present a little bit about our reflective listening skills. So I just want to start with a little story. It's from the time of the Buddha, when he first started teaching. And on one occasion, he was seated, ready to teach, and two deer approached and knelt down in front of him and raised their ears. And their ears were raised in the act of listening and being present to the moment of the great teacher's words of wisdom. And their kneeling bodies, were a sign of respect for the Buddha, and also, of course, a kind of relaxation so that they could really be present to the teaching. Sakyon Mifa Rinpoche describes listening as an auditory meditation. I think that's quite an interesting way of seeing it. So it's both an inward reflection and an outward presence. The listening isn't it isn't new to Buddhists. It's really an underpinning, a foundation to the practice path of the Buddha's teachings, and it's mentioned in the fourth precept, speaking and listening. It's an important practice, and of course in the Eightfold Noble Path, it underpins right understanding, right view, right thought or intention, right speech, and right action. So as Buddhists, we this is a really core practice and skill that we focus on and develop in our lives. A good conversation is the kind of dance. It's a play between interlocking human minds, and the object is really not only to get your word in, but to create a harmony between those in the conversation. And even when there are different views, it's possible to weave a conversation in such a way as to maintain harmony in difference. Essentially, there's nothing wrong with difference. It's an important characteristic for us to come to understand ourselves better and to understand the world. So let's not steer away from difference, but let's find that harmony in the way that we can share and talk about it. I want to just take a moment to pay my respects to the great Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed, and just to acknowledge the great legacy that he's left for us, not only for the Buddhist world, but for the world in general. Listening was a really deep practice that he engaged in and he taught. And a deep practice requires that we empty ourselves. We empty ourselves of all the grasping and the grabbing and the needing to try and work it out. Just let ourselves be open and empty. And this leaves space so that we can listen deeply. The Buddha himself says about listening, if we haven't cultivated the arts of listening and speaking, then how can we know how to listen to each other? So it is very important for us. And listening, of course, to ourselves as much as to listening to those we're in communication with. So to listen, we need to be present. And that, what does that mean? To be present is not just to bring the hearing or just bring our body to the situation, but to bring the whole body awareness, to be really hearing, sensing, attentive to what's happening, both inside us and in the engagement. Listening isn't just about waiting for the other person to stop talking. It's about really hearing what the other person has to say and why they're saying it. So you may not pick up fully the intention in the words that are spoken, but if you pay attention, there are other subtle signs that give us a clue about, what it is. Why is this person, saying what they're saying, or why have they come to seek our engagement in a conversation? Again, paying attention. Just deep listening, it's more than hearing with our ears. As I said, it's talking in what is, it's taking in what is revealed in any given moment. And it's to be present in our own mind and body and heart to the situation and the people we're engaging with. It's a way for us to open to other people and to ourselves. And of course, that's a core practice also in the Buddhist path. Complete stillness leads to complete awakening. This is a lesson that comes from Avalokitesvara's awakening. In the Shurangama Sutra, the Mahayana Sutra, Avalokitesvara speaks of perfect penetration through hearing. And Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's enlightenment came in a different way to many others. It came through following sound and entering into silence, into the depth of silence. And this is why this Bodhisattva is the Bodhisattva who reaches out and hears the cries of the world and doesn't turn away. Only with this deep listening can we help to relieve the suffering of another being. If our head is full of all sorts of stuff, we've got no space to be able to hear not only the verbal story that someone's telling, but to be able to pick up the nuances of what this person is experiencing or wanting, needing from us in that moment. Another example from a different tradition, Mila Ripa, the sage, who I won't go into the story, but he committed some very serious crime and was banished by his teacher to meditate in the wilderness, and he became a great, he attained something very, very important in his practice. But you'll see sometimes depictions of him, and he's sitting in the wilderness and he's cupping his hand to his ear. And this is the gesture of listening. And he's listening to his teacher as he meditates in the wilderness. Now, his teacher's not with him in the wilderness, but he understands, as we understand, that mind to mind is a very, very special aspect of our practice when we develop to a certain level. We can never really know how another person feels. We can only imagine. Unless we check out what we think is happening for someone else and get a direct response from them, we just don't know. And often it's not appropriate for us to do that. So it's important that we listen really carefully, as if for the first time. We may have known this person forever, but each moment we come anew. and we listen mindfully without interruption. And we hold, aside our preconceived ideas about them, about us, about the world. We listen without judgment. Not easy, these things. Without interjection. These are very challenging skills for us to develop, but they are very possible. And we listen in order to obtain as much understanding of their experience as we can. Because we already know what we know, but if we want to really understand more deeply, we have to let go of what we know and open to what's presenting to us in this moment that we don't know yet. So the first mechanics of listening, particularly when you're in a situation with another, and you're in a monastery and someone's come to visit, or you're in a centre and someone's come and wanting some support in some way, mute your phone. And better still, move your phone out of hand contact. Because, we all know that when the phone is in front of us, even if it's muted, we pick up very quickly. We've trained our minds very well. We see the signs, a call's coming through, a message is coming through, and we can't settle until we check it out. So move it away, and that, we can be there, present, wholly for the person or the people that we're with. Try not to interrupt as someone is telling their story or, explaining something. Try to make eye contact, but only when the other person's comfortable with it. So again, this requires, the intuitive kind of attention that picks up the more subtle signs of communication. Again, your appropriate distance from someone. Some people are comfortable with a more intimate spacing. Others need to have, a little bit more safety and distance. And hearing the other, take a moment to become present and centered before you engage with them. Just let your own mind and body settle. Give yourself space to come into this engagement. Try to sit with silence. Silence is a very wonderful part of communication. It's not a deficit. It's an opportunity for us to give space for that inner thinking and reflecting to happen. So if silence is, difficult, just try to sit comfortably and, with a gentle smile rather than needing to jump in and rescue yourself more than rescue the other person. As I said before, tune into the non-verbal cues. And actually, the non-verbal aspect of communication is more than 90% of how we communicate with each other. Less than 10% is what we actually pick up from the language, the verbal exchange that we have. So, we are just automatically, naturally attuned to, the non-verbal signs and communications, but bring them into the present. Be aware of them. Use them in an intentional way, rather than just, kind of allowing them just to be there in the background. And bringing them to consciousness means that, we can have a much greater understanding of what this is in terms of enhancing our communication. Ask questions, but questions that express your genuine interest, not questions that lead to where you'd like to go. So if you've got an agenda, you're not going to be much help to someone. Of course, it's important that you have some understanding of what's required here, but that will that will, that will develop in the conversation. So don't assume that you know already. Allow the conversation, to take its course and be alert to the signals of, so this is something that this person is wanting, from me, or wants to talk about more. Listen to yourself, as I've said, clarify your intent. Why are you here? What is it that you want from this? Be aware of whether you're listening or speaking to benefit yourself or the other person, or to understand or to convince the other person. Often, as teachers, we're really clear about what we want to impart here. But if the other person isn't really in the same zone, then it's a waste of time. So let's just try and make it a conversation, the dance, where we can we can both gain from it. Note your own physical and emotional reactions in real time. What's going on? Be aware of any postural tightening, any sort of growing temperature or any anxiety, or just be aware of those small signs. We're all very tuned into that. It's a really essential part of our practice. So it's really taking your practice off the cushion into engagement. We're all very, very trained in this way, but usually we sit on the cushion and then we get up. I've seen that many times in the meditation hall. Someone will sit in meditation and they'll think they've had a wonderful practice, and then they'll get up and first thing they'll do outside the meditation hall is yell at someone. So let's, practice taking it off the cushion into the community. Not easy to live in community with people. And so that's why these skills are really important, not only for the people who are coming to seek our guidance, but just with each other. So try not to give advice or launch into a story about your own experience, not at first anyway. Give people time to unpack their own story, and it may be very appropriate at some point that you share something from your own experience. That's sometimes, a point of real opening up in a conversation. But again, just judge when that's a useful thing to do, and when you just need to encourage someone just to keep opening up their own story. And by opening up their own story, people are identifying their own solutions. We all have our we all have our own resources. We may not know what they are, until we can unpack them. And often unpacking them means, being with someone else really helps us to do that. When someone's there in an attitude of listening and an interest in our story, we can touch deeper into ourselves, and with a little bit of support from the guiding person, to identify, well, this is this is a strength you have. This is a great thing that you can use in this circumstance. So it's all, it's that really, that attitude of listening, of interest, of sincerity, and your attention, presence to someone. And then, it's really something that becomes another intuitive skill in ourselves. At first, we have to make the effort to kind of identify these things and intentionally practice. But very soon, they're human skills, they're human attributes, and they become very much second nature for us. When you're asking questions, try not to just ask questions where there's a yes or no answer. Try to open up the conversation, so that you're seeking further clarification from the person, so that they get the opportunity, to be invited into, expanding, looking deeper into themselves and expanding on their story. And it's easy to miss the underlying meaning at times of what people are saying. So you can use a rephrasing, you can just check back with people and say, look, I think this is what I heard. Is that what you were really meaning? Is there, do you want to expand on that for me? Is there something that I've misunderstood here? It's, people are really, really grateful for that opportunity to clarify. Empathy, of course, is an important practice in any relationship communication. And of course, the deeper we experience our own suffering, as in terms of the first noble truth, empathy and compassion grows naturally in us. It's a result really of coming into more deeply claiming our own story in relation to the first noble truth of suffering. And so what also helps, of course, is that reflective or contemplative meditation process, and that softens the habitual boundaries in the brain and the empathic region of the brain, so that our empathy grows and expands, opens, and becomes more natural in life, not just in the communication process. Cross-cultural communication, actually understanding, educating yourself a little bit about, others from different cultural backgrounds before you meet with them. Understand a little bit about, their cultural values, their perceptions, manners, social structure. Manners is a big one, isn't it? If we know appropriately the greeting, and we can, greet someone in the way of their cultural, practice, then that can just, really open people to a much deeper level of communication with each other. I found that when I was living in the monasteries in Thailand and Korea, was, I really paid attention to those nuances, and so people were very comfortable in opening to me. Okay, so how much time? Sorry. Okay. So there was some interesting research done that I came across a few years ago now, actually, when I was teaching, spiritual the spiritual care in Victoria, Buddhists, and this research actually was looking at grief counselling, but I think it speaks across counselling and counselling support generally. And what they found was that 40% of the effectiveness of the engagement is the work that the person does themselves in telling their own story. And as we listen in a very effective way with someone, it gives them space to process what they need to do. As I was saying before, in the course of telling our story, we gain insights, new understandings about our situation, our story, and so that that then in itself is a healing, and also raises in our own mind answers and strengths and skills that we can take forward. And so that's a very important part of the exchange. 15% of the effectiveness in this relationship is our ability to help them identify their own resources. So as I've spoken about, as they're telling their story, for us to be able to, help them to see what their resources and strengths are. And 30% of effectiveness in that relationship is our skill in empathic and reflective listening, not talking, but listening, and being there for them in a way that we demonstrate that, we care and we want to hear what they have to say. So fixing things, giving advice, these things are really way down the list, although we go into it thinking, that's what we need to do. And, people will say to me, well, I don't know what to say here. I don't know about this. I haven't got the skill to tell them how to do that. And I say, you don't need to tell them. They will tell you what it is that, their situation is. And they're able, in that engagement, to be able to identify their own resources and solutions. We don't need to do that. Now, in terms of a specific contexts, there's something that comes from the Korean tradition, and it actually comes initially from the Confucian teaching, and the adage of what is the situation, what is correct relationship to that situation, and what is our correct function, what's required of us in that situation. So we find ourselves in communication in many, many different circumstances. We may be in a support situation with someone, who's needing some kind of counselling support, or just a friend to be able to talk to. We may find ourselves in a teaching engagement, in a monastic dialogue, all of these different situations. So if you use this kind of framework, first of all, we need to, stop and say to ourselves, what is this situation? And what does this situation demand from me in terms of right relationship to the situation? And once we've identified right relationship, then, we proceed automatically to, so what is our right, correct function in this circumstance? So, for example, if I'm an attendant to my teacher, my situation is really clear. I'm there, to support him in any way that is part of our, the expectation, and to do that according to an understanding of what of what's required in terms of my physical relationship to that situation. So to acknowledge that difference. And of course, correct function means I understand what's correct speech, what's not, what's correct action, what's not. This can be applied to all the different situations, and that can be enormously helpful for you, just to use that rather than tying yourself up in knots with, I don't know what to do here. Here I am in this situation. Try and plan beforehand. So I think that's as much as I'd like to say now, and we're going to have an opportunity for question and answer or for discussion over the afternoon. And so I look forward to that, and we can unpack more of this if you like, but also we can have the opportunity to share about circumstances that you personally would like to bring into that conversation. So thank you.